Do all of you know where to find the two great commands in the Bible? Do you know that those are the ones Jesus gave? He reduced everything to two great commands. And of course, in that chapter, along with it went the story of the Good Samaritan and the rethinking what ministry is. I was always aware of something more important than we were getting. Something that was so much more important. And when I became aware that the two great commands that Jesus gave were some of the most important things he ever said, and I took it deeply, profoundly, seriously, and I practiced it every day till I understood the value in it. When's the last time you heard a sermon on it? When's the last time you read it with seriousness? When's the last time did it get your attention? I tell you, it got my full attention. Now the word is, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And the second one, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Just those two scriptures changed my whole life. It changed how I saw people. Eventually, I came to understand that even my children are my neighbor. My mother was my neighbor. My dad was my neighbor. You're my neighbor. There's not categories of neighbors. There's the way we relate to people. And if we could relate in such a way, like when I made my mother and father my neighbor instead of just my parents and their problems and the things they did or said or taught me that were wrong, when I got out of that and I say, no, they're my neighbor, and I studied their whole life, it changed the way I saw everything. But if I just studied the way they acted when I was with them, it just causes me to be confused and critical and using them to blame for other things. Can you imagine judging no one and giving each person equal value? Can you imagine that? One day I was in Aleppo, Syria, and I had a tour group with many, 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 many problems. One of the girls was dying of cystic fibrosis. I brought her on the tour. Can you imagine? She had 104 fever. But she wanted to go. And I said, you'll go. Now, I went into the dining room, and there were a group of Russian men sitting in a place eating, and they were the KGB that was at that time in Syria. And I decided to go over and sit with them and have a conversation with them. So I went over and I sat down with them. And I asked them if I could have a beer. And I just sat there and I began to talk with them. I began to talk to them. Boy, were their eyes riveted on me. This was so unexpected and so unheard of. They couldn't believe it. One of the things I said to them, I know all about the history of Russia. I know there were 20 million Russians murdered in World War II. I know you're suffering. Then I said, you know what? On the inside, we all pray because we can't help it. It's just there. It's just a crying out. We can't help it. We can't stop it. It's who we are. Well, the conversation went on for a while, and it was two-way a little bit, but they never took their eyes off of me for 1 minute. And then I invited them to stay for our dinner, and then we'd dance afterwards or do something as a group. They said no, they couldn't do that. So they were lined up, and they were ready to march out. And the man who was with them, went with them, and then he came back. And he said to me, you have no idea the impact you made on their lives tonight. They will never be the same. You see, they were my neighbors. And I knew all about them. And I cared about them. And they were important to me. Not as Russians, but as human beings. As people that are significant in this world. All of us are significant. I think it says in Scripture, treat everybody in the world the way you want to be treated. How often do you obey that? Do you pay any attention to that? Is that important to you? Is that a life and death issue to you? Is that a guiding force inside your spirit? Or did these words of Scripture just come for you to read and know where they're located in the Bible, and now you've done your reading and you know where they're located and you quote them? Do you live them? Do you live them?